You're listening to the Potaholics Comedy Network. Potaholics.com.
Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I am Mike Coletta.
And this week, we're going to be talking about Sega Saturn games. In the past couple of episodes, we've done different, like the top 10 list of top selling games for the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64. With the Saturn, we're taking a similar approach, although it's because the list is so different between Japan and the United States, we're just going to kind of talk about like 10 popular Sega Saturn games. But before we get started, Mike has some things to say.
Announcement time. So,
Woo.
I don't know how long you've been listening to this podcast, dear listener, but maybe you notice when we start, we have a little Potaholics thing go up. Well, Potaholics as a network is kaput. It is disbanding. And you may also notice that this episode is going up late. Well, that's because their website just completely shut down. So we were kind of in trouble. So from now, this episode might have Potaholics on it, but I believe the week after this, we're going to be straight up on Libsyn, and we're going to be independently produced by Tyler and I, which is going to be great. I'm actually really excited for it because we're kind of
Me too.
I don't want to be under the banner of someone, you know. I want to be our own person, you know.
That's right.
Our own group person.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you say that, definitely. So
Yes.
I'm sorry that the episode came out late. It probably came out on Monday night or Tuesday. And I'm sorry if there any confusion, but we're also probably going to change our name as well.
Ooh.
Yeah, we might. I'll leave the Codex symbol up there for a while, but we're going to change our name to Infinite Bits.
Because everybody knows having more bits is better.
More bits is better. And that's what we all learned from the initial history of video games, is the more bits you have, the better you feel. So let's have bits for every meal.
That's right.
That's true. So those are the announcements. We're going to be independent, and then we're going to have a name change, and then still same great Tyler, still same great me, you know, great podcast, fun stuff, but we're going to be our own collective podcast person. You know?
Yeah.
We're just being ourselves.
We will be taking 100% of the zero profits.
Yeah, that's
from
right.
this
I wanted
podcast.
more of the $0 than...
That's right.
Because Potaholics was taking a pretty big cut of the $0 we were getting for the
Yeah.
podcast. So, you know what? It's time for us to branch out and really do our own thing. Fly like the pretty, beautiful, pixelated bird we are. Anyway, today we are
All right.
talking about Sega Saturn, and we are going to do the best-selling ones, but the honorable mentions might be just as long as the best-selling, because we noticed this big difference in that the global top 10 best-selling is very different than the United States best-selling. There's a video that came out actually about 3 or 4 days ago about the best-selling, top 10 best-selling Sega Saturn games of all time, and their list maybe has like 2 or 3 repeats of the other list I got it off of, which is videogamecharts.com. And global sales are super different. So we're going to start with the global sales. And then at the end, we're going to jump in with some American titles that are more commonly well-known. So the number one global sales Sega Saturn game is Virtua Fighter 2, released on December 1st, 1995 in Japan. That was the Japanese release date. I believe most of these... The American, well, I should say the North American and European release dates are about a month afterward or within the same month. So I think the American version of this was actually released in mid-December 1995. Christmas time.
Okay.
That's what it's all about, holiday sales.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this had 1,930,000 units sold globally, which is crazy.
Almost 2 million.
I'm about to sneeze, by the way. Am I going to sneeze? Oh, no. Hold on. Oh, I think we're okay. That was really close. That was really scary. Okay.
Because you only get one.
You only get one podcast sneeze for the life of a podcast. If you sneeze twice, they put you in podcast jail, and then you can't
It's
come
true.
back. It's not allowed.
You can't come back from podcast jail.
Oh, man. Anyway, so, okay. The game took Sega's famous AM2 development team, which you're going to hear a lot about this episode, led by Yu Suzuki, roughly 12 months to develop. And in a 1995 interview, Yu Suzuki said Virtua Fighter 2 was his favorite game he had ever made for 2 reasons. First, the polygonal graphics were just like way better than Virtua Fighter 1. So he's like, oh, look at this improvement. This looks really cool. It was like an exciting time for video games. Yeah. And they came up with this whole new counterattack system in Virtua Fighter 2, which was a pretty big deal. Like, oh, no, you can counter something and then attack back. And you like real fighting, you know? It brings it more closer to real life. And that's what we all want from video games. Okay?
Yep.
The other thing they did is the developers designed 4 new characters for Virtua Fighter 2, but only 2 of them actually made the final game, and those are Lion and Shun. Those made it to the final game. The other 2 characters we'll never know. I didn't even release them. Know. I don't think they're in a folder somewhere at the offices of Sega's AM2 development team. To show everyone how awesome the Saturn port was, because this was originally an arcade game. Like most of these games actually were originally arcade games, which I thought was maybe their first mistake.
They sort of look like that too. Like there's this weird sort of style. I don't. It's hard to like put into words what it is, but like when you look at an arcade game, it has a certain sort of like smoothness to it, I guess. And the Sega Saturn has a lot of games like that, especially from around this era too, that came out like before the PlayStation.
Oh yeah, it's very.
Well, this game is after the PlayStation, but
yeah. So the dev team, the way they were like showing off how great the Saturn port was to everybody is they decided to have non-playable demos of the characters Lion, Shun, the 2 new ones, and Pai and Lao running on Saturn hardware at 60 frames per second, which is the exact same speed as the arcade version, as Tyler just mentioned. That speed, that arcade speed that looks all good, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what made people be like, wow, this game looks really rad. So good for them.
Yeah,
they did it.
The 60 FPS. I wonder if there are any 60 FPS fighters on the PlayStation going on at this time, or if that was like a solely arcade thing.
Maybe. I feel like Sega really was all in on the fighting genre.
They were, yeah. This was probably the place to play fighting games, at least for a while. Especially if you wanted accurate arcade ports of fighting games, because the arcade is the place to play a fighting game. If you want a good version of that game, you play it on the Saturn.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Yep.
Fighter Man's Dream. Fighter Man? Sure, why not? Sega Rally Championship, December 19th, 1995, in Japan. It sold 1,160,000 copies, roughly. And Sega Rally Championship was directed by Kenji Sasaki, a former Namco employee, and he was known for making Ridge Racer. I remember Ridge Racer.
Ridge Racer.
Yeah, that game was awesome. So Sasaki chose the rally race because, quote, we were after something in vogue in terms of motorsport racing, and as we were keen on great engine sounds, cool cars, and great sensations, the obvious choice was rally, end quote. Obviously. We all know that. All of us racing aficionados out here. Sega Rally only featured 3 cars. What? That's not a lot of cars at all. Yeah.
No.
Sega Rally ain't got no cars, okay?
But that didn't matter because it was number 2.
That's right. They had the Toyota Celica GT4. That was one car. They had the Lancia Delta Group A. That was the second car. And then they had a secret car, and that was the Lancia Stratos. Lancia.
You have to put in a sweet code to get the secret car?
I think you can do that, or you can unlock it in the game.
Oh. I wonder how licensing for these kinds of things work with cars. Like, does Sega pay Toyota and say, hey, we want to put your car in our game? Or does Toyota pay Sega and say, hey, thanks for the advertisement? Or is it just a mutual thing where they're just like, hey, for free, let us put your car in our game and you'll get free advertisement out of it?
Well, I think it's like a mutual thing, the deal. But it's weird that you mentioned that because Fiat in this game had a gentleman's agreement with the developers allowing the use of official logos of Fiat and such in Sega Rally Championship, and there was no formal sponsorship deal, which I thought was really weird.
Interesting. Yeah, that's
Fiat
weird.
was just like, yeah, you can use our stuff. It's free advertising for us. No big deal. You don't have to pay us anything, which is kind of cool. You know. Also, there's no paperwork signed, which seems weird in business.
Yeah.
Business loves paperwork.
I just imagine like the CEO of Sega calls the CEO of Fiat and it's like, hey, can we put some billboards up in our game? Fiat's like, I guess, sure, why not? Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
why not?
See you never.
See you never. Bye-bye. So since this was a rally game, the big sell of Sega Rally Championship was how different surfaces changed the way you drove your car. So if you were on a dirt road, it was way more hard to control, a little bit bumpy, than if you played on like a pavement track. And now that doesn't seem like a big deal now, but it was a pretty big deal back then that they were able to do a physics engine that actually showed that while you were driving. And then the arcade version came out first, and the Sega Saturn version was actually a completely different game. Isn't that weird? Like it was like as in they like rebuilt it up from the like the cars were the same and stuff like that, but it was very, very different. The entire design team was different except for the producer and the game designer, Tetsuya Mizuguchi. And he was the guy that ran both the arcade version development of that and then the Sega Saturn version. I think they wanted to make it different a little bit. So it's like, hey, you know what? These are 2 different games that you now have a reason to buy this and buy a Saturn, you know, instead of just going and putting in quarters at an arcade.
So instead of being like, oh, I want to play the arcade game at home, it was like, I'm going to play the arcade game at the arcade, and that's awesome. I'm going to play a different game at home.
Yeah, I'm going to go home and play this game. It'll be really cool. So the Saturn had a link cable, but Sega was like, no, we want people to have split screen multiplayer, because their whole thing was we don't want to make it so people don't have a chance to play multiplayer, because it's like the fun of the game is to race your friends. And I thought that was very nice.
I feel like System Link features like that were they were available. Both the PlayStation also had a serial cable that you could do some games supported for multiplayer, but I never knew anybody with those cables for either of those things, and nobody ever talked about it. The only link cable that I ever really used was the Game Boy one, obviously, and the only thing we used it for was for trading Pokemon, of course, trading and battling Pokemon. I feel like the System Link thing didn't really become popular until the Xbox era with Halo. Plugging in your Ethernet cord
and
yeah,
go at it in this 4v4 combat like champions do. Oh, what a great time! What a fun time to be alive. Ready for number 3?
Yes.
Virtua Fighter 1. That's right.
Oh.
Virtua Fighter 2. Better sales than Virtua Fighter 1. This one was released on November 22nd, 1994, and in Japan. And then in America, it was released on the May 11th, 1995, because I think that's when it came out. You know?
Okay.
Here.
It was about 6 months later.
Yeah, and it was sold 1,070,000 copies. 1,070,000. And Virtua Fighter, was created using hardware developed by Sega and, believe it or not, aerospace technology firm Lockheed Martin. What?
Whoa.
Yeah, the hardware was called the Model 1.
Oh, wow.
Are you
talking about the arcade version?
Yeah, like flight sims.
Okay.
Like, I'm thinking it's like, because video games were used a lot for flight sims and like flight training, right? So it's like, ooh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when it came to marketing the game, Sega did something pretty cool. They did not introduce all of the fighting moves at once. They actually built some hype. They had an early time hype machine going where they would show off one move at a time to the Japanese press like every month or so. Just to build up
that's
to
like
the game.
how Smash Bros does it now, where they don't show off moves at a time, but they show off like a character at a time, or they like slowly reveal more and more and like keep building hype. I think that's a really cool way to do it.
Do you think they'll ever have Waluigi in it?
I hope so. I think if they did, it would be the most hype moment of Smash Bros. History.
That Reddit post would go through the roof. Okay.
Yeah.
Virtua Fighter 1 was a launch title for Sega Saturn. We talked about it a bit a couple episodes, I think. And if you bought a Sega Saturn in the US, it came with Virtua Fighter. It was bundled.
Oh.
Yeah, which is pretty neat. We talked about it on another episode, but this was the game that made everyone in Japan buy a Sega Saturn. Like, this was the game. This was the game that everyone was stoked for.
Yeah.
Virtua Fighter.
And you had a direct comparison between the 32X version of this game and the Saturn version, and it was clear the Saturn version was like far and away the way to go.
Oh, yeah. It looked so
and in Japan, the 32X didn't really do as well anyway. That was more of an American accessory.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the 32X was... We already went into it. It's a bummer. Okay. Number 4, Virtua Cop.
Oh, man. Just what I always wanted.
Yeah, you want to be a virtual police officer. It sold 620,000 copies approximately on November 24th, 1995 in Japan. That's when it came out. And it on the Sega AMD 2, that development team again, all these games, by the way, were designed by those. All the Virtua games were designed.
Same team.
Yeah. Same team. They took the arcade ports, the arcade versions, and they changed them into a port, because this was an arcade game as well. And they actually worked on this and Virtua Fighter 2 and another game we're going to get to later at the same time. So like they split this AM2 department up into 3 divisions, and they all worked on different games. So Virtua Cop, they wanted to try to keep it as close to the arcade version as possible, but they would still find areas they'd have to tweak, I guess would be the correct word for it. Like,
Tone
for example,
down a little bit.
Yeah, the hardest conversion in the whole game was the 3rd level, which was in an office building, because there were too many polygons to change.
Just so many polygons.
So many polygons. And here's my personal experience, because I've played Virtua Cop in an arcade, okay? And it's pretty fun with a light gun. But I feel like these kind of games do not translate well to a controller or a keyboard and mouse. I don't think they work.
Yeah.
Like the on a rail shooting game, it's just way too easy with the keyboard and mouse, I think. And also for a controller, it's just kind of wonky. And I'm definitely referencing the PlayStation version of Area 51 when I talk about this, because that came out and it was not good.
Well, the skill expression with an actual physical gun is different than using a controller, or like, because you're not playing this game to like move through the crime scene and like shoot bad guys. You're playing it because you're like actually holding a gun, and like that's the interesting skill, is how well I can aim with my hands, not with a controller with a keyboard and mouse. So when you separate the input method from the game, you just sort of like, it's a totally different game, even if it's exactly the same. Otherwise, it's just totally different.
Yeah, definitely. It's just it just feels weird. It feels off. That's what it felt like to me. I had Area 51 for PlayStation. I was like, oh, I thought this would be fun. And luckily I got it from a friend, so I didn't feel guilty for paying money for it. The fifth game, I thought this was really cool. It's called Fighters Mega Mix. Came out in 1996, and they had 620,000 copies sold, much like Virtua Cop. We're going to run into that a lot, where I think Virtua Cop just barely outsold this game.
Yeah.
And once again, it was designed by Sega AM2. In a statement, they said, quote, "Towards the end of the year, we always think about having a festive game for all the users who support the Sega Saturn," end quote. And that was Fighters Remix. This game was kept a secret until 2 months before release. And while it was easy to create moves from Virtua Fighter 2 to fit on a single disc, they had the team, like, they were required to develop new compression techniques just for this game. Because what Fighters Mega Mix is it combined characters from Sega games, like all their fighting games, Virtua Fighter 2 and Fighting Vipers to Janet, and like from Virtua Cop 1, she was in the game, like the character Janet. And then Hornet, the car from Daytona, USA, was in this game as well.
So it's like this was the Smash Bros. Of the Sega Saturn.
It was essentially... Smash Bros. Is a better example. I was thinking like Marvel vs. Capcom, but yeah, this is the Sega version of Smash Bros. Definitely. Huh. And the game was met with huge positive fanfare. Like really great, because it was a surprise. No one saw this coming. The only complaint I could find for it was that the graphics were not as good as Virtua Fighter 2, and my guess is... that was because they were trying to just rush this game out. You know, they're like, oh, this is our surprise. You know, our secret surprise. So
expectations are low. We can release something a little bit subpar and people will still be happy.
Exactly. And as a game, I mean, it really shined. Like, people really like this game. And they think it was still very popular among people who like fighting genres. So the next game is one of my favorite ones I found. It was called Puyo Puyo-san. And it came out on Valentine's Day, 1997, February 14th. Sold around 600,000 copies. And this game is pretty much like Dr. Mario, you know, where you have like two pieces, like two different colored sprites stuck together, and you have to rotate them to match with other sprites to make them disappear. Yeah. Is that
kind of like a Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine? Is kind of like that too, right?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of different puzzle games like this. But the story... the story. Here's the breakdown of the story.
This is the real differentiator.
Yeah, Satan, as in the Prince of Darkness, moves the sun closer to the earth. And everyone's kind of fine with it because you get a lot more tropical places, but two people get fed up with it, and so they decide to stop him with the power of puzzles.
Well, obviously. How else would you do it?
Yeah, that's all I could really explain. I think there's more to it than that, but... from when I was reading the description, it was very confusing, and I just really got all stuck in that Satan's out there moving the sun closer to the earth. I'm like, dude, wow, I can't believe it's like a jerk like that. But the game itself, like I watched some gameplay of it, and it's super colorful, and it's like got this fun tropical theme, and there is a story with it as a puzzle game, which I think is kind of cool. So yeah. I mean, I think it's mostly a Japanese release. Like I don't think it released in America. Pretty much exclusively Japan, but it was very popular, which is neat.
I liked for like story-based puzzle games, Tetris Attack on Super Nintendo had a pretty neato storyline.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I always like when puzzle games have like storylines built in.
I do too. I really do too. Okay, number 7. I'm gonna get through these, Tyler, and then I'm gonna leave you with all the honorable mentions. That's all.
Okay.
Okay. Daytona, USA. Came out on April 1st, 1995 in Japan, but it was not a joke. It really came out that day. It sold roughly around 550,000 copies. This was the third game that was developed by Sega's AM2 team in 1995. It was taken from an arcade port, and the other two games were Virtua Cop and Virtua Fighter. So Sega AM2 was split in 3 ways, and they got Daytona USA, this group. And the soundtrack, this is pretty interesting, of Daytona USA is different on the Sega Saturn versus the arcade. As in, the arcade version has songs that were like sampled onto a Yamaha sound chip, like the drums, and the composer Takanobu Mitsuyoshi. He actually was the one who sang on the soundtrack too.
Oh yeah,
But-
and it's a pretty famous song, the Daytona.
Oh yeah,
Let's go away.
it's pretty great. It's pretty rad. But
I
the
can't do it justice.
I think you did a great job. It felt like he was here. That's what it felt like.
Wow.
You were just saying
Thanks,
that little
Mike.
bit of it. Yeah, of course. So the Sega Saturn version though of this game actually had a better soundtrack than the arcade version because they were on CD-ROM.
Oh, so it wasn't on a CD for the arcade. Interesting.
Yeah, so they were able to re-record this song with real instruments and lyrics and re-sung each audio track, and they even had like an original soundtrack that came out, which is pretty cool. So, yeah, this game on Saturn, about probably very similar to the arcade version, but better soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty neat, though. I played this game too. I really like this game. This game's fun. It's really funny how they really stuck to racing and fighting.
Yeah. I've
That's-
played a lot of Daytona in the arcade too. That's because you always walk by the cabinet and there's always like 6 of them lined up because they have multiplayer, and there you can just hear the Daytona song and it just draws you in. Let's go away.
I could listen to you sing that the whole episode. Okay. Number 8, and this is where we stop off on our global top 10 list. So it's not really a global
With
top 10
8,
list.
so it's
With
global
8.
top 8.
We're doing
It's like MySpace.
our global top 8. Yeah, it's exactly. Oh, man. If you didn't put me in your top 8 and I knew you, you're rude. You know, it really bothered me. Okay. Sakura Wars came out in 1996. 550,000 copies sold. This is, I think this is only a Japanese game. It did not come out in the U.S. at all. It was developed by Red Company and Sega's CS2 R&D team. And it was the first game in the Sakura Wars series, which is a very popular series in Japan, and it combined overlapping tactical role-playing, dating sim elements, visual novel gameplay elements, and also puzzles. So
Oh
this
man,
game,
so this was Persona before Persona.
yeah, it was all about story. It was a very story-based game, and it was originally released on the Sega Saturn, and the game was ported a lot. Like, it was ported to the Dreamcast, and then a remake of it was made for the PlayStation 2, subtitled In Hot Blood.
Sakura Wars in
In
Hot Blood.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. So the game might not have it actually might have the coolest background I've ever heard. Okay, I'm just going to read you the quote that was on the Wikipedia page, and you tell me if this sounds really interesting or not. Set in a fictionalized version of the Taisho period, the game follows the exploits of the Imperial Assault Force, a military unit dedicated to fighting supernatural threats against Tokyo while maintaining their cover as a theater troupe. That's pretty cool. That's a cool
Maintaining the
story.
cover as a theater troupe.
I like to think of this as the first Fear game. This is the first Encounter Assault Recon game. That's what this is. Oji Hiroi created the concept for what would become Sakura Wars in 1990 after he saw a Japanese stage production of the play Shanghai Rhapsody and was so impressed by the spectacle of the acting troupe he saw on stage that he's like, I got to make a game based off of this. And the game was a collaboration of Hiroi and composer Kohei Tanaka, and it's pretty cool. It's very much like you're playing this story. Like, I tried to watch gameplay of it, and I was straight up like skipping ahead because it was so much talking in Japanese to get to like the little puzzle section. Like it felt like a story, and then you got some mini games going on, and then sometimes you got to like check on your guys. It's really interesting. I thought it was really cool looking though. Definitely. I wish there was an English version of it. I want to know that story. You know, I want to follow this ghost fighting theater troupe.
So it got ported around a whole bunch, but never saw an English release?
I don't think so. Let me see if Sakura Wars in Hot Blood came out. If it came out in the U.S. That would be my guess, right?
I think it did, yeah.
Maybe maybe the re-releases might have. Yeah, the original Sega Saturn version was not, though.
So this is off the Wikipedia page for Sakura Wars. As of April 2018, Sakura Wars So Long My Love is the only Sakura Wars game to see an official release in English translation.
Wow. So we'll never know.
So Long My Love, which is that?
Tyler and I start taking our Japanese Rosetta Stone classes together so we can play this game and understand what's going on.
We could probably find a fan translation. That game was on PS2 and Wii.
Ooh. A Wii game. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
But Sakura Wars, very popular Japanese title. As an American ding dong, I know nothing about it. But
Something I'm finding interesting about the Sega Saturn is, so we're talking about like top selling games, where the top selling game worldwide sold almost 2 million units, right?
Yeah.
For the PlayStation, when we get to the bottom of our top 10 list, even that game sold 3 times as much as the top Saturn game.
That's
just Cortex Strikes Back.
Just kind of shows you how Sega goofed. They really goofed. But
I want to see how far down the PlayStation list we have to go before we get something that sold
that low.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, when you think about it, because what did Sega do? Sega definitely, they did the whole 32X thing, which has confused consumers, and then they went all in on the Saturn, even though they still had that 16-bit market going on in America, where if they stuck to it, they would have just taken all that business as well, because Sega won with the Genesis. They won the console war, and it's when they went into this generation that they really, really goofed.
Yep.
Totally.
You have to get to the 43rd best-selling game on the PlayStation, which was WWF SmackDown, which sold 1,920,000 copies.
Oh, man. I mean, good for WWF SmackDown.
Yeah. So
before they
even
were
that's
WWE.
outsold. Yeah. And that game came out in 2000, which was 2 years later than the Saturn. So the PlayStation did have a longer lifespan because they sort of just cut the Saturn short. Once they went all in on Dreamcast, they were like, you know what? Let's get this out of here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's too bad that the Saturn didn't do as well. I think it's because it sort of came in like this in between phase, where it was like between the 32X and like the PlayStation in terms of power, or at least what the games looked like, and you could really tell. I think Sega sort of messed up there, and in trying to get to beat Sony to the market, they like came up with inferior hardware that made it really hard for developers to make good games. And also, they didn't really beat Sony to the market. They beat them by like a month, and they sacrificed a lot to get there.
Oh, yeah. Poor Sega.
Yeah. They'd do the same thing later with the Dreamcast. You know, it was really cool. It was definitely better than what was out at the time, but it was very quickly eclipsed by the PlayStation 2, which had, you know, it was just better in every way. Except for in the memory card department, because the Dreamcast had those sweet screen memory cards.
I'm also going to say, except for in the name department, because the Dreamcast is a great name for a console.
Yeah, PlayStation 2, uninspired, right? You already had a PlayStation. What are you doing?
Yeah, this is just the second one? What?
Yeah.
I don't want its son. I want something new.
Yeah,
you know?
Call it something else. Nintendo's really good at that.
The Dreamcast.
Yeah. The GameCube. Gamecast.
GameCube. The Ultra 64. Kidding. It never came out that way. Oh, man.
So let's get into some honorable mentions here. These are also some pretty top selling games. These are the games that stuck out to me as a person who hasn't played a whole lot of Sega Saturn. It just wasn't in my life growing up, except for my neighbor had a Sega Saturn that I only played a couple of times.
Ooh.
But he had a game called Nights into Dreams.
And Nights is very spelled differently.
Yeah, Nights with a lowercase I. It's all caps with a lowercase I.
It looks kind of cool.
It's like Apple before Apple.
That's right.
Yeah, Nights into Dreams often ends up on like top lists of Sega Saturn games because it's so quirky and weird. This is like really the only game I knew about on Sega Saturn. It's about two teenagers who find themselves in like a dream world, and they got to beat the bad guy to restore peace to the dream world. And the two teenagers don't know each other outside of the dream world. And then like at the end, spoiler alert, at the end they like see each other and they like share a look where you're just like, oh, they know each other now. The gameplay itself is kind of two-dimensional. It's all 3D. Like the world is 3D. It's not sprites or anything like that, but the game feels two-dimensional. You're like flying around. I'm doing this hand movement that doesn't make sense on an audio-only podcast. I
really appreciate the hand movements though, because they explain it to me and I need to understand more.
Yeah, so you're flying around in a 2D space, but you're kind of flying in circles and stuff too. The goal is to go through the rings and get all the gems, and that's how you beat the bad guy. It looks really cool. It's super bright and colorful. This game was developed by Sonic Team, which is obviously the team that made the Sonic games. They started this game right after they finished working on Sonic and Knuckles.
Ooh.
One thing that I really think is cool is there's a special version of the game called Christmas Nights that was included with some magazines, and it was kind of given away for free. Probably Pizza Hut was giving it away at some point, it was really just a demo of the game with 2 levels that I don't think were actually in the full game. So it is a separate game. But if you play this game while either during December in your console's date and time are correct, or if you set your date and time to be in December, it gets all Christmas themed. And it's super cool, and it's all festive. And the main character that you play as, Knights, he kind of looks like Santa Claus, and it's really cool. And you can play as Sonic in this mode, which is way different when you play as Sonic, because Knights can fly around and like do cool acrobatics and stuff. Sonic his feet are on the ground, and he's just jumping and getting stuff, getting the rings and stuff like that. So it's like a weird proto 3D Sonic game that doesn't play really anything like a Sonic game, but it is very interesting. And Sonic looks super weird in it. He's like, it's like this weird kind of deformed, like they didn't know what they wanted to do with the 3D Sonic. But it's kind of fun. This game got remade for PlayStation 2 and for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC in, I want to say, about 2008. And it also got a direct sequel over a decade later called Knight's Journey of Dreams for the Wii.
I love that. I love that they came back to it.
Yeah, they brought it back. That game didn't do so well. I remember being really excited for that game and then seeing the reviews come out, and it turned out to be just kind of so-so. And I was like, well, I only have so much money to spend on Wii games, and I guess I'm not getting Knight's Journey of Dreams then.
You can get it now, though, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably. I do want to get the Steam version on PC.
Oh yeah,
cool.
I want to get the Steam version of this original Knights game on PC for sure.
Yeah,
that's what I want.
So yeah, that's Knights into Dreams. Very cool. It's definitely like kind of an iconic Saturn game. It is the quintessential Saturn game, if you ask me. The next game that I want to talk about is, of course, I got to talk about a JRPG. This one's called Grandia. I don't have much experience with this personally, again, but I have watched people play it. I've watched some YouTube stuff. This is a JRPG in the vein of like Final Fantasy, turn-based sort of strategy kind of battle stuff. It's fully 3D, but the characters on the screen are represented using 2D sprites, kind of like how we were talking about they do in Mario Kart, where it's like it looks 3D, but it's actually just 2D sprites. It has some stuff in it that is like kind of considered more modern. I consider more modern in terms of JRPGs. It doesn't have any random battles. It's got bad guys on the map, like in a Persona game or in later Final Fantasy games, where the bad guys are just on the map, and then you run into them, and that's what starts the battle. And if you hit them from behind, you get like a preemptive strike and stuff. I think it's pretty cool. The story is standard JRPG fare. A boy ventures out into the world, joins forces with a ragtag group of unlikely heroes, and he got to stop the big bad guy.
You know, if it's not broken, don't fix it. You know? That's a great way.
It's a tried and true JRPG story formula, and Grandia doesn't stray too far. It did see a sequel on the Dreamcast, which was then ported to the PS2 in Grandia 2. From what I can tell, Grandia 2 doesn't seem to have much in common with the original game. They take this sort of Final Fantasy approach of just being completely separate stories and stuff like that. Grandia did see a release on the PlayStation a few years later, and it's coming out on Switch and PC this winter, 2018.
Whoa!
Yeah, so I kind of want to play this, and I think I'm going to check it out. I might hit it up on Switch or see what the Steam version is looking
I like that everything's coming out on Switch, and you can just take it to go.
Yeah.
Like a delicious Chinese food meal. I love it.
Did we talk about how Night Trap is coming out on Switch? I feel like that's interesting because they're way back when we were talking about...
the Night Trap, that weird video
FMV game.
Yeah, FMV game.
When we were talking about the legal disputes, and somebody from Nintendo said, "You'll never see a game like Night Trap on a Nintendo console." Well, 20 years later, it's on Switch. So he was wrong. Got him.
Got you good. Nintendo, you done got.
That's right.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, going back to the taking games to go thing, that's really completely changing the game. I think we can all agree on that. Like, it really, the fact that I can just I could take my Switch to a restaurant, if I want to. Mm-hmm. And I could just take it anywhere. It's great. I can't
socially
get
unacceptable to bring your Xbox to a restaurant.
It really is. People look at you funny.
Yeah.
Which is upsetting.
It's a hassle. That's right. The last game on the honorable mentions list, for me anyway, is a little dragon game called Panzer Dragoon. This, along with Knights, is the other like iconic Saturn series for me. Panzer Dragoon is a series. They have a couple of like mainline games, and then a couple other like there's like an RPG spin-off and stuff like that. The gameplay is kind of like Star Fox on the Super Nintendo or N64, except you're piloting a dragon instead of
I'm into
a
that.
spaceship. Yeah. I was watching some videos, some gameplay footage of this game, and it looks super dated. Even by Saturn standards, it's pretty, like, those polygons are really sharp. You could accidentally cut yourself on one of those.
You don't want to cut yourself on a polygon. That's how you get infected.
That's right. But it is cool and does, like, a lot of the Star Fox things. I do want to check out Panzer Dragoon Saga because it's set in that same world, but it's like a JRPG, turn-based RPG. You know how much I love RPGs.
Oh, you do love a good RPG. There's one thing I say about my dear friend Tyler. It's that he loves a good JRPG.
Yeah.
Or RPG.
So I want to check out this Panzer Dragoon Saga game. Panzer Dragoon's last game was interestingly on the original Xbox. They released a game called Panzer Dragoon Orta, which is the same gameplay as the rest of the series. It's kind of Star Fox arcade, like rail shooter. But it is backward compatible on Xbox One. So if you want to play it in 4K 60 FPS, you can go check that out. It's only $10 on the Xbox store.
I'm going to spend $400 on an Xbox One X, and then I'm going to spend $4,000 on a gigantic 4K TV, and then I'm going to buy Panzer Dragoon Orta for $20 and play it on those.
Oh, yeah. You're going to play an original Xbox game on this.
Yeah, that seems... I'm going to buy it
setup.
for that. I think it makes the most sense. I'm probably also going to
You need to have a dedicated system just for Panzer Dragoon Orta.
That's just like you have a dedicated system for Jaybird. You got to have one, you know? You can't have other applications bogging down your Jaybird time.
Right. If my Jaybird is... I can tell when the frames are off, you know?
You can feel it. You can feel it for sure.
You can feel it, yeah. If you're a true pro like myself.
Yeah, a pro like you knows, you know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna design a TRPG. That's a Tyler role playing game about you being the world's greatest Jaybird player of all time.
You don't actually play Jaybird in this game. You role play as me playing
role
Jaybird.
play as you playing Jaybird. It's a TRPG. I'm into it.
TRPG.
Yeah, I'm into it.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Coming out on Unity later this year.
That's it for my honorable mentions. Do you have anything you want to add to the list, Mike?
Well, I will mention one thing, and that is if you are jonesing to know what the #1 best-selling Sega Saturn game in America was, it was Madden 98.
Of course it was Madden 98.
Yeah.
Of course it was.
Because football, and everyone loves football. Also,
that's right.
If you were interested in buying Nights into Dreams on the Steam store, it is currently $7.99. So,
what a deal.
Yeah, what a deal to play a really sweet old game. I like it. You can also buy something called the Dreamcast Collection, which comes with Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Radio, Nights into Dreams, Sega Bass Fishing, Sonic Adventure DX, Space Channel 5, Part 2. All for $30.
No Sonic Adventure 2, just the first one?
No, just Sonic Adventure DX, it says. Yeah.
But it comes with Space Channel 5, too? That game's
good. But then I mean, I was more blown away by Sega Bass Fishing, personally. But, I mean, whatever floats your boat, Tyler, you know?
Yeah.
Who doesn't love to catch some e-fish? That's what I like to do. So, but Madden 98, #1 best-selling game in America, because football. You know, people like football here. So,
sure. In America.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's right. And Madden has always been a very popular title. Very popular title. So I think in conclusion, if we're going to sum up this whole Sega Saturn thing, a lot of people loved it for the nostalgia's sake, but boy, oh boy, it came out at a bad time, and it had some serious tech issues, not only from how technologically advanced the console itself was, but how hard it was to design for the console, because they did that 2 processor thing that really, Sega goofed.
Yeah.
They really just goofed.
And it was clear, like from a consumer's perspective, if you look over at the Sega house, you're just like, wow, that house is really on fire. They don't know what they're doing with this 32X thing, with this Saturn thing. It's like still not very good, even though it came out. And then you look over at this Sony house and you're like, wow, they look like they got it together. Like, that console is definitely better than the Sega Saturn. And I'm not worried about them burning me again by releasing a Sega 64X in 6 months. Also, so I'm going to go with this PlayStation thing.
Yeah, for sure. I also think that Sega way spread themselves too thin. They made a 30. Yeah. They had like, what was it we said? We said it in the episode. They had like 7 different consoles at one time they were all supporting. It's way too many. Yeah.
Because they had the Genesis, they had the 32X, they had the Nomad, the Game Gear. Then they
still were supporting the Master System then too, right?
Oh, geez, yeah.
Yeah. So they were, because it was just, they spread themselves way too thin. Whereas I think PlayStation said, we're going to do one thing and we're going to do it really well. And that's usually where the success lies in these technological advances, I would say. So
Yep. It's all about games. Gotta have games.
Gotta have games, and you gotta focus on the one thing that makes those games good, which is your console. Make it good, you know? Just don't spread yourself too thin. I mean, Tyler and I are experts, so...
Hey, I have always said the fewer consoles you maintain, the less likely you are to fail at consoles. That's why I don't maintain any.
That's right. That's why you don't maintain any. And that's why we know
I've
each
never
other.
failed.
I mean,
Yeah.
Tyler has never failed in the business of making consoles.
That's right.
That's what we always say. So, hey, Tyler, what you been playing?
I have been playing Diablo 3 on the Switch,
Ooh,
which has been pretty fun. I don't know if I talked about that last week. I think it came out last Friday.
Oh, yeah, you talked about it a little bit, I think. But yeah, that's cool.
So I've been playing that. Looting and grinding on the Switch is a lot of fun. I think I already talked about how we were playing Red Dead Redemption also.
Oh, yeah.
The first one, not the second one. We'll move on to the second one eventually. And then, of course, I'm always playing Destiny.
We did
check
Shattered
out
Throne.
a little... Oh, yeah, we did Shattered Throne on Destiny. That was fun. We got the Queenbreaker bow. And yeah, that was really cool. I would love for more of those because it's a lot easier to get 3 people together to do a really hard thing than it is to get 6 people together to do a really hard raid.
Yeah.
I would love if they made 3-person versions of all the raids.
That would be so dope.
That would be super cool.
If they were just
Anyway.
like, hey, the next raid layer is 3 people, you'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm into that.
Yeah. I've also been playing just a little bit so far. I maybe have more to talk about this next week, but in light of the Diablo mobile announcement, I kind of got a hankering to play like a mobile Diablo game. So I picked up Dungeon Hunter Champions, which is of course free because mobile.
Oh, yeah.
And it has like 10 million different currencies. But it's a really interesting, like kind of Diablo style, like hack and slash game. The so far the story missions that I'm doing only take like 2 minutes each because they know when you're on a phone you don't have that much time to you could just bust out something real quick, you know. But it has this like cool sort of system that feels kind of like an MMO where you have like a tank and a healer and then like a damage and you can sort of manage them. The game also it gets pretty grindy being a mobile game. It gets pretty grindy. Of course, you can pay to skip the grind if you're into that. But it also has like an autoplay where if you're doing anything in the game, you can press the auto button and it'll just kind of play for you. And I don't know, like part of me is like, well, this is stupid. The game's just playing itself. The other part of me is like, this is okay. I'm all right with this. So yeah, I've been playing a little bit of Dungeon Hunter Champions. Kind of fun.
Nice. Well, I've been playing Red Dead Redemption 2, Destiny, obviously, Destiny 2. And then I decided to finally just boot it up on the old cell phone. And I played RuneScape, old school RuneScape.
Oh, yeah.
And I played the tutorial island and a little bit past that. It's hard to get into playing by yourself. I think it's very cool that it's on mobile, which is the whole point of it, to make it so you're not by yourself anymore. And it's definitely a player base. Oh my gosh, those servers are crowded. There's a lot of people in them. But I don't think it's for me. I think I'm realizing now that I like the kind of RPG. My phone keeps going off. I apologize. I like the RPG where I like Destiny, where I know what's going to drop for me, and it's something that makes my guy more powerful. Whereas RuneScape, it's like, all right, you got to cook some food to eat, and then you got to do that. Like it's like you're doing chores almost. It feels like I'm doing chores.
It is really a like. There's no real point to RuneScape. The point is like, I don't know, what do you want to do, right? So like when I played RuneScape way back in the day, my thing was always I loved mining. Like owning the whole supply chain of like mining something and then smelting it and then smithing the weapon and then like going and killing something with that weapon. I found that to be pretty fun for a little while. But then after a while you start to realize you're like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Yeah,
that's what happened to me. I was like mining and then I'm like, what am I doing this for? Like my character had an existential crisis and then I logged out. That's how it ended. He's like, what am I even doing here?
That's a game it's for a certain crowd of people that played back in that day, and you know, the time has moved on. Time marches on.
It was just funny.
I'm not there anymore.
It was funny because I was so excited for it last week, and then I played it, and I was just like, oh man, this isn't what happened. This is how I don't remember it being. But I did play it with friends when I was a kid, so that's probably why. But yeah. Anyway, well, that's it for the episode today, I think. And then we talked about those announcements up front. We're going to change our name. We're going to be independent. You know, we're going to be come back, rise from the ashes like a phoenix, and become a stronger podcast. Mm-hmm. Like that. I think that's how it's going to go. Next week, we are probably going to go in the book again because I want to finish out the book.
Yeah, we definitely need to finish out the book.
These last 3 episodes have been off book, and I loved them. I had a good time, you know, Tyler, just talking to you, my dear friend, about video games. But I think we need to go back to the book, finish that out, and then we'll set a game plan for how we're going to do the rest of it. And it's probably going to go console by console, I'd like to think.
Yeah, I think so.
So
I think we'll have to, because we don't have the luxury of having all those interviews that Stephen L. Kent has.
And we love Stephen L. Kent. I mean, he's like a father to me. That's what I look at him as.
Yeah, me too.
I sent him a letter. I was like, "Dear Dad, I've been using your book for my video game podcast." He hasn't responded yet. I also don't know his address. I just put Stephen L. Kent, Ultimate History of Video Games, and I just put it in the mailbox.
I'm just hoping it's going to get there eventually.
It's like Santa. It'll get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as always, you can rate and review and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play. You can find me at Micoletta on Twitter. You can find Tyler at SneakerElf, ELPH, on Twitter. You can email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can write us a long handwritten letter and then go to the towns we live in, Los Angeles and Seattle, and try to find us. That's fun. Or you could throw it in a bottle in the ocean, and then maybe it'll wash up on a beach somewhere and we'll find it.
Yep, maybe. Who
Maybe.
knows?
You know, there's a lot of options. We got options. So,
Yep.
But thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
This has been a Podaholics Comedy Network presentation. Podaholics.com.
Let's do it.
Pure recording action. Do you want me to start it, or do you want to start it? Who started last time?
I think you started last time. If I start it this time, then you can jump into like announcements and stuff. Because if you want to talk about all the Podaholic stuff. So I'm going to start this one off by saying, what is up, everybody? Rick Cock is here. And today we are talking about Sega Saturn games.
Please don't do it. And now I have to put that at the end.